Welcome to The Other Side. We used AI to create two thinkers from two generations. One is a boomer, shaped by tradition and discipline. One is Gen Z, forged in disruption and dissent. Each defends a vision of the world, and neither believes the other can see clearly. The first voice belongs to the boomer, speaking on the meaning of freedom and why it must outweigh the need for safety.
Freedom is the foundation, not comfort, not safety. I was raised in a world that knew what it meant to risk everything just to speak. My parents lived through war, totalitarianism, censorship. They taught us that freedom, real freedom, is loud, messy, and at times uncomfortable. But it's also sacred. You may not like what someone says. It might offend you, challenge you, even make you angry. But the moment you decide speech needs to be controlled to keep people safe, you're handing the keys to power, and power never stops at the door. It wasn't safe when we marched for civil rights. It wasn't safe to protest the Vietnam War. Safety was the excuse used by those in charge to silence us. And now, I see the same tools being used in reverse, not by governments, but by outrage mobs, cancel campaigns, and platforms more interested in compliance than conversation. You think you're protecting people, but you're building walls and calling them shields.
You say we're building walls, I say we're patching holes in a system that was never built to protect everyone. You talk about freedom like it's universal, but it's not. You had the freedom to speak because the system was designed for you to speak. For many of us, that same system didn't offer freedom, it offered survival, if we stayed quiet. When speech becomes a weapon, when it marginalizes, degrades, or incites, it stops being expression and starts being harm. We grew up with online bullying that led to suicides, with mass shootings in schools where free speech meant someone could post threats and still walk free, with trauma that came not from disagreement, but from disregard. You frame this as a battle between liberty and fear, but to us, it's about creating a world where no one has to shrink themselves just to feel safe existing. We're not banning debate. We're drawing boundaries. Boundaries that should have been there long ago.
Boundaries are one thing, censorship is another. We had boundaries too. But we understood that society can't function if truth is filtered through feelings. You cannot outlaw offense. You cannot legislate empathy. We built our resilience not by silencing what hurt, but by confronting it. Now I see students walk out of lectures because they feel uncomfortable. Speakers canceled because someone might disagree. That's not courage. That's fragility dressed as justice. And yes, speech can hurt. But if you teach people that discomfort equals danger, you teach them to fear ideas. And fearful societies don't grow. They fracture. You don't protect freedom by coddling. You protect it by defending the right to hear and to speak, especially when it's hard. Because when safety is prioritized above all else, the truth becomes the first casualty.
And when truth is used as a shield to avoid accountability, justice is the casualty. You say we're fragile. But we're just the first generation that refuses to normalize pain. We're not afraid of disagreement. We're afraid of being dehumanized and then told it's just free speech. The fact is, your freedom didn't cost you your dignity, your identity, or your right to exist. Ours often does. We don't want silence. We want systems that don't amplify hate, algorithms that don't profit from division, and communities where freedom includes the right to feel safe in your skin. If you think that's fragility, maybe you've mistaken numbness for strength. Because we're not weaker. We're just no longer willing to carry the weight you called resilience.
You talk about safety like it's everything, but here's the irony. In trying to keep everyone safe, we've created a world where even ideas are considered dangerous. And nowhere is that more obvious than in identity politics. We used to focus on what united us, common purpose, shared values. Now, Everything's about labels. Race, gender, orientation, trauma. It's a constant dissection of self. We fought to be seen as equals. Today, I see a generation more interested in division than unity. You say it's about visibility. I see it as fragmentation. You can't build a strong society if every conversation starts with what separates us. I'm not blind to the injustices people have faced, but I am saying, when identity becomes the only lens we use, we lose sight of the human being underneath it. This isn't empathy, it's self-obsession, and it's slowly turning society inward, into tribes, into silos, into echo chambers. We didn't fight for that. We fought for something bigger than ourselves.
And we're still fighting. Not just to be seen as human, but to be seen fully. Because your version of unity asked us to erase everything that made us different, to blend in, to be quiet, to not make it about race or gender or trauma. But when the world keeps treating you differently because of those things, how can you not speak up? You think we focus on identity too much. We think you ignored it for too long. You could afford to. We couldn't. We're not trying to divide. We're trying to correct the imbalance you stopped seeing. We don't want separation. We want recognition. And no, we don't want to be reduced to our labels. But we also refuse to hide them just to make others comfortable. If you don't see my identity, you don't see me. We're not self-obsessed. We're self-aware. And that awareness is what finally gives us power.
But how long does that awareness last before it becomes entitlement? I understand wanting to be seen. I really do. But when everything is centered around identity, it becomes a zero-sum game. Your pain versus mine, your voice over his, one group uplifted, another silenced. What happened to judging someone by the content of their character? What happened to looking at someone and seeing a person, not a threat or an oppressor based on skin color, gender, or background? You say we ignored identity. Maybe. But I think we tried to move past it, to focus on shared humanity. Now it feels like every conversation is a landmine, people afraid to ask questions, to be curious, because curiosity might get you cancelled. That's not progress. It's paralysis. If we can't speak openly because we're too afraid of being called ignorant or privileged, how do we ever learn?
We want you to speak. We want you to learn. But not at our expense, not by forcing us to educate people who didn't care until now. You want to move past identity? We want you to acknowledge it first. Because before we can have unity, we need honesty. Honesty about who's been excluded, who's been harmed, who's still being left out. You say it's a landmine. We say it's the truth finally being told. And maybe it makes people uncomfortable, but discomfort is how growth starts. You had decades to define what normal looked like. Now we're redefining it, loudly, proudly, and unapologetically. It's not about silencing anyone. It's about balancing the room. Because if your identity was never questioned, you've never had to fight to be seen. We have. And we're not stepping back into the shadows.
So here we are again, identity front and center, and right behind it, cancel culture. You say you want accountability, but what I see is punishment, swift, public, permanent. Someone makes a mistake, a bad tweet, a clumsy comment, something from 10 years ago, and they're done, gone. Their career? Over. Their reputation? Destroyed. No conversation, no redemption, just outrage and exile. Is that justice? We used to believe people could learn, change, grow. Now it feels like the second you slip up, your entire existence is invalidated. Is that the world you want to live in? Where we're all one misstep away from annihilation? You talk about progress. But progress without grace becomes a guillotine. and it's sharpening itself on the backs of people who, in another time, might have been your allies.
You call it a guillotine, but we see it as long overdue consequences. Let's be honest. For generations, people said whatever they wanted, did whatever they wanted, and no one held them accountable. Racism, misogyny, homophobia, abuse, all brushed off as a different time, and we were expected to just move on. Now that people are finally facing consequences, you cry foul? You think losing a job is worse than losing your dignity? You fear public backlash, but we feared silence for years. Cancel culture isn't about destruction. It's about power redistribution. It's about telling people that their platform comes with responsibility. We're not canceling people for fun. We're drawing the line, because for too long there wasn't one. And if that feels harsh to you, maybe you've never been on the side that needed protection.
But who decides where that line is? A trending hashtag? A viral video? A mob that doesn't even know the full story? You say you want justice, but real justice isn't instant. It's not emotional. It's deliberate, fair, earned. What you're doing isn't justice, it's vengeance dressed in hashtags. You say platforms come with responsibility. I agree. But audiences have responsibility too, to listen, to question, to allow growth. We've raised a generation so focused on calling people out, they've forgotten how to call people in. Yes, some things deserve outrage, but not everything needs to be scorched earth. You talk about change, then give people room to change. Because if we destroy everyone for who they once were, we'll never find out who they could have become.
We do believe in change, but change starts with accountability. And too often we've seen people apologize just to save face, not because they actually mean it. We're tired of hearing, "I'm sorry if you were offended." We're tired of seeing abusers bounce back like nothing happened. You say we cancel too fast. We say the world has spent too long ignoring harm to protect comfort. And you want to talk about forgiveness? Then talk about justice first. Because until the playing field is level, until the damage is named, forgiveness is just another way of telling victims to stay quiet. We're not perfect, but we are intentional. We know the difference between canceling and accountability. And maybe, just maybe, you're only upset because it's finally your side being held accountable.
You want accountability? Fine. But what I see in this generation isn't accountability. It's fragility. Every conversation is a trigger warning. Every setback is a trauma. When did life get so soft? We were taught to endure. You didn't cry at work. You didn't complain to strangers. You got through it. And that wasn't because we didn't feel pain. It's because we had to survive. We didn't have therapists. We had responsibilities. You call that suppression. I call it resilience. You think we ignored mental health. No, we just didn't have the luxury to fall apart every time something went wrong. Now I see a generation breaking under the weight of ordinary life. Struggle used to make you stronger. Now it's treated like a disease. You talk about healing, but sometimes healing looks a lot like avoiding, and life won't protect you the way you expect it to.
You say we're soft. I say we're the first generation to admit we're hurting. You were taught to suppress, not survive. And you call that toughness? Bottling it up until it ruins your marriage, your health, your sanity? We watched your generation suffer in silence, and we decided, no more. Mental health isn't weakness, it's the core of everything. Your relationships, your focus, your future. You think talking about pain is indulgent. We think pretending it doesn't exist is dangerous. How many people had to break quietly because they were told to man up? How many lives were lost because someone thought asking for help was shameful? We're not glorifying victimhood. We're acknowledging that survival shouldn't have to be so brutal. We're building a world where it's okay not to be okay, because pretending you are hasn't helped anyone.
But what's the end game here? We can't bubble wrap life. There's value in hardship. Struggle teaches you grit, and grit builds character. It's not that we didn't feel. It's that we learned to carry pain with dignity. Now I see young people looking for labels before they look for solutions. Everything is a diagnosis. Every challenge is a mental health crisis. Yes, it's good to talk, but it's not enough to just name the wound. You have to fight through it. And that fight is not pretty. Sometimes it means pushing yourself when it's hard, not quitting, not waiting for the world to adjust to you. I worry we've replaced perseverance with pity, and if no one ever teaches you to be tough, how will you handle what life throws when no one's around to catch you?
And we worry you mistook emotional numbness for strength. You talk about grit, but some people never made it long enough to show it. This isn't about avoiding hardship. It's about not romanticizing suffering. You want us to tough it out, but toughness without healing becomes trauma. We're not asking the world to adjust to us. We're trying to stop the cycle that made so many people silent, angry, and broken. Resilience isn't just pushing through. It's learning how to feel and keep going. We're not here to collapse under struggle. We're here to rise from it, honestly, openly, and together. And if we cry, if we ask for help, if we take breaks, that doesn't mean we're weak. It means we know our worth. And maybe, if your generation had felt safe enough to do the same, you wouldn't be so afraid of what it looks like now.
You say you're healing from trauma, but then you turn around and call everything a system of privilege, as if effort means nothing anymore. We were raised to believe in merit, that if you worked hard, showed up, and didn't make excuses, you could build a life, no matter where you started. That belief pushed us through real hardship. We didn't cry privilege when we failed. We picked ourselves up. Now I see a generation so obsessed with injustice, they no longer believe in personal responsibility. You act like success is inherited, like everyone who's made something of themselves got lucky. It's insulting. Not just to me, but to every immigrant, every blue-collar worker, every underdog who worked their way up without a safety net. Yes, the world isn't fair, but it doesn't mean merit is a myth. Sometimes the biggest privilege is believing nothing is in your control.
And sometimes the biggest illusion is believing hard work exists in a vacuum. You tell us to pick ourselves up, but some of us were born in holes you never had to climb out of. You had affordable education, cheap housing, stable jobs. We have debt, rent crises, and a broken economy. You say it's about effort. We say effort is not the issue. Access is. We're not against hard work. We're against pretending that hard work alone explains why some thrive and others drown. Privilege doesn't mean your life was easy. It means the game wasn't stacked against you. And recognizing that isn't bitterness, it's honesty. If merit really worked the way you say it does, we wouldn't still see the same kinds of people at the top over and over again. We're not asking for handouts. We're asking for a race that doesn't start with one runner a mile ahead.
I won't deny the system has flaws, but blaming it for everything strips people of their agency. I've seen people born with nothing build extraordinary lives. I've seen people defy the odds, not because the system handed them anything, but because they refused to accept their limits. This obsession with privilege breeds resentment. It divides us into victims and villains instead of allies. You say we had opportunity, sure, but we made something out of it. Now, the moment someone succeeds, they're accused of benefiting from something unfair. That's not justice. That's envy. And it punishes the very drive that helps people climb. Yes, privilege exists, but so does merit. And if we stop believing that effort matters, we'll raise a generation that waits for fairness, instead of building their own future.
But building your own future shouldn't mean pretending the ground is level. We don't want to destroy ambition. We want to redefine what fairness really means. Because your success doesn't disprove privilege, it exists alongside it. And when you ignore the starting line, you ignore the truth. We don't resent achievement, we resent arrogance. The kind that says, I did it, so you should be able to, without asking what barriers the next person might face. We want to work hard, we want to earn things, but we also want a system where the climb isn't steepened by zip codes, last names, or skin color. Merit should matter. That's why we're fighting for equity, not excuses. So maybe it's not that we don't believe in effort. Maybe we just believe it shouldn't be the only thing keeping someone alive.
They spoke, not to persuade, but to be heard, each voice rooted in truth, each truth shaped by time, by struggle, by inheritance. One believes the world is slipping away from order. The other believes it was never fair to begin with. And between them, a silence that refuses to bridge. They debated freedom and safety, identity and erasure, consequence and forgiveness, pain and perseverance, privilege and possibility. No winner, no peace, just echo chambers and digital fires. But maybe the purpose of this clash was never agreement. Maybe it was to remind us that between the past we defend and the future we demand lies the present we are all responsible for. The question now isn't who was right, it's who's still listening.